So did you know that the single largest contributor to solid waste in the country is demolition and construction? That was a big fact that I just learned. And we're really excited to hear from Adam Corneil. You might recognize him from his stint on Dragon's Den last November. In his presentation, he's going to be talking about a new future for old buildings. Adam, thanks so much for joining us, and we're really looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I'm particularly happy to be at this event where there's a whole bunch of different companies and entrepreneurs who are people that are doing things to make the world better. I do a lot of presentations where there's a lot of talk about doing better, but this is a very collective group of great thinkers. So I am the founder and CEO of both Unbuilders and Heritage Lumber. We're two brands under one corporate umbrella. A little bit of background about myself. So I've been in sustainable construction for 19 going on 20 years, ever since I was 16. And I'm a passive house certified builder. So I came into deconstruction, demolition from the other side of the industry. And I'm also a reclaimed wood and deconstruction expert, obviously doing this for many, many years. And I'm a policy change advisor to both the City of Vancouver, City of Victoria, and pretty much any municipality that'll listen to me, as well as the provincial government, and part of the National Zero Waste Council Committee on C&D waste, construction and demolition waste. Unbuilders was founded in 2018 after we were deconstructing buildings under my contracting company for many years before then. And Heritage Lumber, which is the back end of the business, the reclaimed wood brokerage, we launched that just officially about 6 months ago. Looking at this big, massive problem that Scott introduced that we are tackling with our company. So when you look at the entire construction industry in Canada, construction and demolition, we generate about 4 million tons of waste annually. And when you put that in comparison to something like plastics that we're all very familiar with, the plastic industry, the last number I heard was about 2.8 million tons. And organics is even less than 3 million tons as well. So when you're looking at the solid waste we produce as Canadians, construction demolition waste is the largest single contributor. So it's the largest problem in terms of climate change when it comes to solid waste. And that 4 million tons, when it goes to landfill, it decomposes and becomes methane, it contributes about 20 million tons of CO2 into the atmosphere every year. So this is a massive problem. When you break down that waste, what is the stuff that's going to the landfill from C&D? 1.5 million tons, nearly 40% is lumber. And 100% of that is either salvageable or recyclable. So there's no reason it should be in our landfills. And when you break that wood waste down further, a huge portion of it's old growth lumber, which I'll explain what that means exactly in a few slides. But it's a highly valuable material. It'd be like throwing gold into the garbage. It makes no sense. Having a look at what traditional demolition looks like, this is what we've all become accustomed to. And so we're tearing down buildings fully intact, all the materials, all the good products still in there. And we're doing this just out of speed and a cheap cost, because our tipping fees at our facilities to dump this material, they're quite frankly too low. And so you have this problem where 99.9% of buildings in the country are taken down this way. And this is exactly what we are disrupting. Looking at what our solution is to this problem. So much like the circular economy in general, in order to tackle these large problems, you need several players at the table in order to do it. We can't do it all ourselves. So we have this fantastic partnership with Habitat for Humanity, and we've formed the Rebuild Hub, which is shown in the middle here. And so on the one hand, we have Unbuilders, who provides the service. We deconstruct buildings, both residential, commercial. We're doing multi-story commercial buildings. We also do renovations. And Unbuilders, last year alone, we diverted nearly 2,500 tons of material. And that's just in 1 year. And that's with just a Vancouver operation. And we've also set a record by salvaging and recycling over 99% of a building. Our average is about 95% diversion from the landfill. So when it comes to what the materials are in our old buildings that we're taking down, most of that material should not be in the landfill. It has a second use and has a better use than decomposing. And then Heritage Lumber is the back end of the business. So we are a reclaimed wood brokerage and soon to be a product manufacturer. So we're looking to make reclaimed wood products to feed back into the new construction industry. And then we have Habitat for Humanity, as well as another charity called the Reuse People that we work with, who are the recipients of all the other materials. So we really need them, and it has many added benefits having Habitat involved. They sell these products through Restore, and they use the proceeds to build affordable housing. So in hiring and promoting deconstruction, you're actually helping in the construction of affordable housing as well. So having a look at a typical hand deconstruction, this isn't always the way that we do it now because we use machines, but you can see the process compared to the demolition video I showed is dramatically different. We're really reverse engineering the building. So we'd already gone through the interior, we'd stripped out all the fixtures, the finishes, your drywall, your insulation, and then we start on the frame and the structure and we work from the top down. As we're working through the process, we're separating materials on site to ensure that they're going to the correct recycling facility. And obviously our salvage piles are building up as well. The goods beyond the lumber, as I said, those are all getting donated to Habitat for Humanity. And that donation yields a tax receipt for the building owner. So we have the total value appraised by a third-party appraiser, and the landowner, homeowner receives a tax receipt, which helps offset some of the deconstruction costs. Looking at what the big challenges that we face and deconstruction in general faces in order to carve a new path, there's four major hurdles. Really, there's two major hurdles and two other subsidiary ones, but the big ones are cost and time. And so we've become so accustomed to doing demolition in the industry because it's fast, it's cheap, but that doesn't mean that it's what we should be doing. And we have built Unbuilders. We've evolved the service to try to reduce the total cost and total time to compete directly with demolition. So we recognize that not everyone is going to choose a service just because it's the right thing to do or the sustainable thing to do. So we've really tried to build the business so that it's almost a no-brainer for anyone, whether you're environmentally focused or not. The second one, so the cost, we've got two different business models that challenge that. Number one is the donation, which I mentioned. There's a tax receipt, and that works great in the residential sector. When it comes to commercial deconstruction, the tax receipt doesn't have the same value for a corporation. So we have an acquisition model where Heritage Lumber purchases the materials that we're going to salvage directly from the owner, which discounts our total service cost. So between the two business models, we're really challenging that added cost over demolition. Then the next big challenge is time, and deconstruction takes more time than demolition. Clearly, we're separating materials, we're making sure they're going to the right facilities, and a lot of it's done by hand. Now, there's pros to that as well, which I'll get to in the benefits, but we have now evolved the service to utilize heavy machinery to try to reduce that time even further. So we're trying to get our crews in and out of site as fast as we can to get our builders and our developers building again. And then the last two challenges that we have are material outlets. Where does this stuff go? In the Lower Mainland, we're very fortunate that we have a lot of really great companies that are taking in the goods, whether it's metal, glass, gypsum, and they're recycling it into new products. So we have that infrastructure in place here. But as we look to expand Unbuilders to other regions, which we do intend to do, that infrastructure is lacking in certain components. So in order for deconstruction to really succeed, we also have to work with other companies looking to expand or looking to start up in new regions that we want to come into and make sure that we can make the same impact. And the last one is policy. Now, we've built the business so that we don't rely on policy, but this is where policymakers can make a huge impact. As demolition construction is the largest contributor of solid waste in the country, we've got new, very aggressive policy coming into play from the federal government to reduce our carbon by 45% over the next 9 years. There is no better and quicker way to do that than to instantly make deconstruction the mandatory service for when you're taking a building down. And looking at that one hurdle of time, how we've evolved is to utilize heavy machinery. So this is a video of a recent deconstruction we did with a crane. And so we took this house apart in big panels. much like prefab construction, having a reduced time on site. This is how we're now deconstructing as well for most of our residential and all of our commercial buildings. And so this project, we had the whole building structure down in under 2 days, what would typically have taken us 3 weeks. And so this is a huge evolution in our service to really start competing directly against those timelines. And in Vancouver, because the city of Vancouver, we've worked with them for a long time, they are well aware of our service and who we are. We actually get permits a lot of the time. The back end of our service, we get the permits approved quicker. So any time delay that a deconstruction could provide, we actually normally make up by having quicker permits released. And I've already touched on this point briefly, but I'll elaborate on it. Just in order for this to be successful, in order for deconstruction as a service to really expand into every region in the country and really in North America, it takes a lot of different players in order to do it, not just Unbuilders and Heritage Lumber on their own, but we really need several people, and we're very fortunate that we've formed a lot of great partnerships. So we have our charities that I've talked about. We also have a really great network of builders, developers, homeowners that are looking to do the progressive thing and really want to support us as well. So a lot of the time the community is pushing us forward. If they know a building's coming down, they'll put our name in the ring to be bidding on certain jobs, which is fantastic. And we've had a ton of support from Van City. We're very grateful for them as our bank, as well as the academic institutes in the Lower Mainland, and several wood shops and other industry players that are buying the lumber, buying the materials, and recirculating it back into the economy. Now, getting into the fine details, what is it that we are recovering primarily? And the main driver for the business, the main reason that I transitioned from a builder to an unbuilder was the old growth lumber that we're recovering. So when I was building, we were doing deconstruction on a small scale, and we were recovering this wood. I knew what the value was because I was building furniture out of it. And when we're looking at buildings 1970 and earlier, which is most of what we take down, they were framed with old growth lumber. That's these big old trees like the one in the picture here, that we have very few left standing today, 2.7% from the latest figures in our low standing valleys are still left standing. We're unfortunately still logging it, which is insanity to me. But that other 97% that we've cut down, that wood is all locked behind the walls of our buildings. And so even though Vancouver is the youngest major city in the world, it was built with ancient trees. So this material it's not just wood, it's not just a raw commodity. This is something that our crew feels pride in. We feel that we're recovering a piece of Canadian history and really the legacy of the land beneath our feet. The First Nations that were in British Columbia before it was colonized, they revered these trees, they preserved them, they were the stewards of this land. They didn't go and clear cut them because they were majestic and they were really special. And so we want to really honor that by recovering this wood and making sure that it stays in the supply chain and not rotting in a landfill or in an incinerator where it's used for energy. The benefits of old growth lumber are it's 3 times stronger than new lumber. So it's actually a better wood on top of the story behind it and the wood grain. And reclaimed wood in general has 12 times less embodied carbon than new lumber. So if you're going to build a building, wood is already a greener building material than concrete and steel, and reclaimed wood is 12 times better than that. So it's literally the greenest building material on the market. So it's really important that we recover this in mass volumes. Looking at what you can do with this wood, these are just a few pictures from my contracting days of projects that we put the materials into. But really the sky's the limit. Anywhere there's wood in a building, it could be reclaimed wood. And it doesn't have to be the rustic sort of barn board look that we're all accustomed to, like the picture in the middle here. You can really process this lumber into whatever you want. So we've done a lot of, whitewashing, gray washing, which is the design style today, very clean and modern. And you can make reclaimed wood look the same way, but still have those other benefits of it being a historic material and low embodied carbon. And what we found is on the projects that we have installed a lot of this material, or we've built furniture out of, the basement beams or walls that we took down, is when the project's done and we're walking through with our clients, or if they've done an open house pre-COVID days, they always gravitate to the wood, and they always talk about it as sort of the centerpiece of their home. So most people talk about the ensuite in the kitchen as a centerpiece. When we're involved in projects, we find that this reclaimed wood story really takes over for all other narratives. And these are just some close-up shots of these different utilizations of the wood. So you can really use it for just about anything, as I said, flooring. You can use it for structure if your engineer signs off on it. Stairs. This project, we built these stairs out of all the wood from the original house when we deconstructed portions of it. And then furniture, bar tops, countertops. And talking about that storytelling, this is a crucial piece that I think as we start to unpeel the layers of the buildings, our crew on sites, we're also unpeeling these various stories and levels of history. So I'll touch on a few different projects that we've taken part in the last few years. This was a house in Fort Langley. So on the BC assessment, it said the house was from 1944. When we deconstructed it, we got down to the foundation. We actually found that there was lumber in there that our team couldn't understand how it was saying it was from 1944. So we did some digging and realized that this house was built over the original farmhouse in Fort Langley. We looked up some historic photos, and sure enough, the floor joists that we were recovering were logged right on the property, probably in the 1840s or 1850s. And had that building been demolished, none of that would have been known. That would have just gone straight to the landfill. So again, as we peel back the layers, we're peeling back eras of time. This is a project that we just completed in Vancouver. This was Turner's Dairy. This is just a picture of sort of post strip out right before we go after and start salvaging the lumber. And this was a warehouse built in 1913. It was in Mount Pleasant, and it was the main dairy distribution center for Vancouver up until World War II. So again, a nice piece of history, and we now have all of this lumber recovered. Half of it the developer kept. AMC Developments is redeveloping townhomes with this lumber. So they're putting it right back into the same development, which is really a perfect scenario for us. And the other half of it, we have acquired that for resale. And the last one, the last story I'll touch on is just a barn that we did last year from 1889 in Chilliwack. This is probably the oldest barn still standing in the Fraser Valley. And this lumber is just incredible. It's all hand hewn. And the main center beams were about 60 feet high in the air, and they were 60 to 70 feet long, a single piece. So our team, we needed an excavator to take them down. And we're sitting there trying to figure out how they built this thing in the first place. And all this lumber, we recovered a huge portion of it. And again, we've got it in our yard now for resale, and it's just a piece of the Fraser Valley history. So again, this is not just wood. We're not just recovering and selling a commodity. This is a piece of our local history. And we really want to make sure that we can tell those stories. Looking at the impacts of deconstruction, the environmental impacts are obvious. I'm not going to go over it too much beyond the last point that I haven't touched on is just that our landfills are literally overflowing right now. So both the Vancouver and the Victoria landfills are looking at closing 12 years earlier because they're overflowing. And if we're going to continue to demolish and generate as much waste as we are in our cities, that means we're going to have to take usable, buildable land to have more landfill space. So it's a serious problem. And in a place like Vancouver, where the land is $12 million an acre, you're looking at requiring 50 to 60 acres for landfilling. So we really need to curb this waste appetite. Looking at the social impacts, I touched on the affordable housing with our partnership with Habitat for Humanity. So that's one thing. But just in general, when we are working on a site or in a community, our crew really becomes entrenched in every neighborhood that we work in. And a lot of the time, demolition, especially if the building has some beauty and some historic value, it can be quite a negative experience for a community. And we see a lot of that backlash with, Vanishing Vancouver and heritage societies being very upset with these buildings coming down. And I want to make clear that we're not out here promoting tearing down heritage. What we're doing is when these buildings have already been slotted for demolition, we're giving those owners a better alternative. We are all for the preservation of heritage, and that's what we're doing in recovering these materials. But we see on a community basis that when we're in a neighborhood and we start to do our work, we have community members coming out. They're coming down every day. They're seeing how much we're salvaging. They get really excited. So it turns this really negative reaction to a building coming down into a positive story. And we get to feel that every day with our crews on site. And then another big impact, which is something that the industry won't ever talk about, is just the health impacts. So when we are taking apart a building layer by layer, primarily by hand, we're finding more hazardous materials inside the walls. So in a typical demolition, you have a hazard material removal process at the start of it, and then you get a sign off and the building can come down. Even after that sign off though, we're having to come back, we're having to take these materials out. So that means you can guarantee any demolition happening in your community has hazardous materials still in it. It's contaminating the air, it's contaminating our waste facilities and our recycling facilities. So I know with the knowledge I have, if there's a house on my street being torn down, I'm very concerned as a citizen. And this is something where we really need to push to see more deconstruction, because that is the only way to get these hazard materials, 100% of them out of the way. Even the best abatement contractors can't get every layer because they're hidden behind the walls. Talking about the financial side and the financial impacts of deconstruction, they're also quite huge. So deconstruction generates a lot of jobs, a lot of good paying, blue collar jobs that we need. And so we look at an industry like the logging industry that's been decimated over the last decade. And there's a great opportunity to retrain people to start doing deconstruction jobs. So we're looking at 45,000 jobs in just BC alone if we transition from demolition to deconstruction, and more than 250,000 jobs across the country. And that's just on the service itself. When you start to look at transportation, material recovery, material resales, those job numbers just continue to go up and up. And same with the economics. So just in the Lower Mainland in Metro Vancouver, between deconstruction and material resales, we're looking at about $3.4 billion added to the economy. And when you stretch that across the country, you're looking at about $19 billion. And again, that's a conservative figure, and that's just on deconstruction and basically reclaimed wood sales. So this is huge for our economy, huge for jobs, and it's good paying jobs that will last. Looking ahead, what does the future look like for the construction and the demolition industry? Well, number one, I'm very optimistic that in 10 years, we're going to look back and we are going to have deconstruction as the industry standard. And as Canadians, we're going to look back and shake our heads that we used to demolish buildings. I know that that's going to happen in this region a lot quicker. I do believe that's going to happen across the country over the next decade. We need to start deconstructing all of our buildings that are coming down. Our cities are growing, we're densifying. That means single-use buildings or single homes are going to come down for density, and old 3-story buildings in the downtown core are going to be coming down so that we can build higher. That's a positive thing. That's what we need for our cities. But there's a way to take those buildings down that's a sustainable way, and it's a morally responsible way. And we need to start incorporating these used building materials back into our buildings. So inevitably, as deconstruction increases, we're going to have a massive amount of reclaimed wood and other products that are going to be on the market. We need to start incorporating these into our designs and start rebuilding with them as well. Otherwise, we're deconstructing just to have materials sit in a yard and rot away anyways. And lastly is low impact design. So we need to start designing our buildings or our spaces with the end of life in mind. So it's designed for disassembly is the buzzword. And we really need to get there as soon as we can, because we're still building single-use buildings with single-use products. And so that was the main factor for me for why I transitioned out of building. Even though I was building high-performance homes, I realized I was building them in a manner that didn't align with my values. So when you think of how we build just about anything else in society, whether it's your cell phone or a car, it's all built in a factory and it's all built with components. But this isn't how we build our buildings. We build them, if you have a problem with an electrical outlet, you have to smash open a wall, you've got to replace it. So we need to start compartmentalizing our buildings, designing for this in the forefront, so that we can make sure that we are part of the circular economy and moving into the sustainable future. Oh, I don't know what happened with the slide, but our tagline is it's not waste, it's just wasted. You can see the effects of a demolition site at the end of the job. on the left-hand side, and on the right, what it looks like when we're done on a job where we have trucks loading out lifts of lumber, going back and ready for resale. The future is obvious to me, and I hope to you as well. So thank you for your time.